Alrighty, Dave, great to have you back on Mea Culpa. Not a lot of time to go through a lot of info, so we're just going to jump right into it. I want to start with my New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, and the DOJ interference. I see you're all over the place talking about it, and I figured, why not here on Mea Culpa? So, the Justice Department recently ordered the dismissal of corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. My question to you is, how does this decision impact the perceived impartiality of federal prosecutions, especially considering the multitude of resignations of prosecutors like Hagen Skoton, who reportedly faced pressure to drop the case?
Good to be back with you, Michael. This one was really troubling because you had some really good prosecutors. You had people who served as clerks for Justice Scalia. That's like the holy grail for conservatives. You had the guy you mentioned who resigned. He was like a 2-time Bronze Star winner. These are excellent prosecutors. These are people who write well, and it's a real loss for the federal government to lose these prosecutors. And so you keep losing folks like that, you become easy pickings for the defense bar. And why'd you lose them over Eric Adams? That's the hill you want to die on? A liberal Democrat? That's the one that MAGA world wants, the hill that MAGA world wants to die on? Eric Adams? And the crazy thing here, Michael, is that if the prosecutors wanted to drop the charge against Eric Adams, they could do so in their prosecutorial discretion based on their review of the case. Maybe the evidence isn't what they thought it would be. Maybe the Supreme Court rulings limited the ability of prosecutors to pursue public corruption cases. In fact, what I just said was what the chief of staff to the attorney general put out on Twitter, saying, here are the reasons why it's happening. But that's not what Emile Beauvais, the number 2 person, the deputy attorney general acting at the DOJ, said. He said it wasn't based on the evidence. He said it was because they wanted Eric Adams to play ball when it comes to immigration policy. And that, to me, is an improper quid pro quo. And I know in court that Emile Beauvais went before the judge and said under oath, this is not a quid pro quo. It's giving him something in exchange for something. That's a quid pro quo.
That is the definition of it.
Right. So, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he's saying we decided not to pursue these charges. We're dismissing it because we need him to assist with our immigration policies. Well, what happens if he opposes the immigration policies? What happens? He goes back to jail is the implication, right?
No, that gives them the implication, the quid pro quo is as long as he plays ball, then he's going to not have the prosecution brought against him. If he doesn't play ball, which is why they were intelligent enough to put in that they could bring the case back at any time that they want, right? So it's basically a stranglehold over the mayor.
And when I say he goes back to jail, what I meant was they will refile the charges. So the problem here is that when you have a dismissal without prejudice, which is what happened here, it's like the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. It's like legalized extortion, where if you don't play ball, then you could face those criminal charges again. If you really believe that the case was bad or that this was an improper prosecution, then dismiss the charges with prejudice or get a pardon from the president. But when you do it like this, without prejudice, it means that at any time they can refile the criminal charges. It's a bad look. And it's why I think you saw that image of Eric Adams sitting next to what I said, his handler, the head of the border czar, who was saying that if Eric Adams doesn't comply with the deal, I'm going to be up his butt, which was just a humiliating moment for the New York City mayor. Can you imagine any more humiliating moment for a New York City mayor? Maybe if the mayor dressed in drag and kissed on it. Oh, we saw that with Rudy Giuliani. So maybe we have seen more humiliating moments for New York City mayors.
Exactly. Look, their motion to dismiss Mayor Adams' charges, and we've seen all sorts of DOJ corruption. I saw it against me personally, as you know. It's what I wrote my whole second book, Revenge, about. where Bill Barr weaponized the Department of Justice. They created a counterfeit federal location monitoring agreement, knowing that I could never sign it because it would have meant I could not have printed and published and distributed and talked to the media about my first book, Disloyal. And so they unconstitutionally remanded me back to prison. What did we ultimately learn? That Jeffrey Berman, who had recused himself, went ahead and was engaged in conversation with Bill Barr, which is improper in and of itself. And not to disclose that was improper, but he went ahead and he did that, where they wanted any charge that was levied against me to be removed, to be dismissed, if it contained anything to do with Trump. They didn't do it before, so I guess maybe they learned a lesson. They understand quid pro quos a little better. Maybe Jeffrey Berman probably should not have kept it a secret to himself, except until he got a book deal years later. I mean, that's the whole problem. What Trump is doing is he's capitalizing on what he knows, which is that the DOJ has a lot of issues. But here, in this specific one, the DOJ's motion to dismiss Mayor Adams' charges, as you said, Emile Beauvais stated, it's influenced by political considerations. Let me ask you this. As a lawyer, as a guy who ran the Palm Beach County, what are the legal and the ethical ramifications if the judiciary rejects the motion, which I don't think they will?
You know, Judge Ho was tortured by this. He was like head in his hands and he didn't know which way to go. But it is in the interest of justice to reject a deal that is motivated by politics. This is the kind of deal that you reject. There is a power that judges have in certain circumstances. It's rare, but they have that power to reject a deal. When else do you reject a deal than when you have the number two at the Department of Justice saying this is a political quid pro quo? He didn't make any bones about it. He wasn't trying to hide it. He said it in the letter and he reiterated it in the court. And although I know he said it wasn't a quid pro quo, but then he described a quid pro quo. He said it's because we want the mayor to assist in our immigration crackdown. So if he doesn't assist in the immigration crackdown, he doesn't get the deal. I mean, that's the implication. That's why to me, it was a blatant something for something. And
I mean, we're talking about, right, David?
Right.
We're talking about if it looks like a dog, if it barks like a dog, it's a fucking dog.
And you know, it's something new that you have prosecutors who are just open and blatant saying that, yes, we are doing this because we want the mayor to be on our side and to do our work in New York City on the immigration crackdown. I mean, that's not supposed to be the motivation for a deal. That's not supposed to be the motivation for a dismissal of charges. You have to follow the evidence and the law, and it's not supposed to be about politics. So that's what this whole thing was about, and that's why it was so troubling, and that's why you saw the mass resignations. I mean, Emile Beauvais could not find someone to go into court and to stand before the judge and say that this is what it is and to defend this. Now, to his credit, Beauvais himself went to the court and did it himself. He should have done that, right? That's what he should do because it was his decision. But I still think it looks bad. As a prosecutor, I think it threatens the rule of law. And I think the judge, I'd say 50-50. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he just rejected. And if he did reject the deal, this dismissal, then it'll be a standoff. The prosecutors will just sit on their hands while the case just sits out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel as optimistic as you. I think that the judge is going to turn around and say, as he did when he was questioned about it, I'm kind of powerless when the DOJ is telling him to drop the case, when his bosses are telling him technically to drop the case. I hope that you're right. I hope that he has a spine here because this is absolutely despicable behavior. But I want to ask you, in your experience, how common is it for the DOJ, especially, you're talking about the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, to negotiate dismissals of charges against public officials in exchange for policy cooperation. And I mean, does this Mayor Adams case align with standard prosecutorial practice?
Ask Danielle Sassoon. She was the Trump-appointed acting head of the Southern District of New York. She resigned over this. She clerked for Justice Scalia. She's not some liberal deep state plant from Joe Biden. So that tells you all you need to know. And it's a shame because she's a brilliant, talented attorney. And you've lost her, and you lost 7 people in that office. And that just doesn't bode well for the DOJ, when it's going to need strong prosecutors to prosecute violent crimes. I mean, they do some important work there. The Southern District of New York has the best reputation of any district within the Department of Justice.
Well, pardon me if I rebuke that comment. I found, under my experience with the Southern District of New York, prosecutors like Thomas McKay, Nicholas Ruse, the ones that were high-fiving when I ultimately accepted the plea. Remember, I was given 48 hours from the first time ever speaking to him. I find the Southern District of New York, Kazami is now making like $10 million a year in private practice, working for a major Fortune 500 company. Jeffrey Berman, I have no idea. If they all fell off the fucking planet tomorrow, I wouldn't give a flying shit. They're all fucking corrupt, those 4 and the others that were working. They knew that there's, that my tax evasion case, yeah, there was a mistake. A first-time offender ever, guy who's paid over $20 million in taxes, never filed a late tax return, not in a cash business, no overseas business, no overseas nominees, they shoved that plea demand up my ass so far by going after my wife. I had 48 hours from a Friday at 5:30. First time I ever heard from these motherfuckers. First time. It was either you accept the plea or we file an 80-page indictment against your wife. That's fucking dirty shit to me.
Michael, you went through a lot, and you didn't even mention the hell you went through by getting sent back to prison for writing a book. No.
I got sent back because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right and not agree to publish my first book, Disloyal.
Right. Meanwhile, Paul Manafort was let out and you were sent back in. And that, to me, was a miscarriage of justice. So I hear you, Michael.
Not a miscarriage, by the way, David, not a miscarriage enough that the Supreme Court would hear the case on a writ of certiorari, despite legal geniuses like Lawrence Tribe and others turning around, like the Gilbert firm in D.C., and others turning around and putting forth a writ of certiorari that was backed up by a multitude of amicus briefs.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this, Michael, look how you're doing now. You've got a very popular podcast on the #1 podcast in the country, overtaking Joe Rogan now, the Midas Touch Network. So, it took a while, but I think you have done very well for yourself, my friend.
I'm just not sure that you ever get past, David, I'm not sure you ever get past 51 days of solitary confinement or 13 months of being abused, and away from your family, not to mention the financial devastation, not to mention the loss of my law license, not to mention the loss of my businesses and so on. I'm not so sure that I would say that I'm anywhere close to par, right? And while I'm sitting here trying to figure my life out, you got guys like Kazami that was in on the whole thing with making like a $10 million salary, a worthless piece of shit. That's really what he is. But you know what? Let me move on and ask you this, because I could sit and rant about how fucked up the DOJ is. But the DOJ was never as fucked up as when Trump and his administration started to pull certain nonsense. And the worst part, now they already know what they can do. I was a practice run. I was the litmus test. And now they know how to push it even further. So let me ask you this, since you were talking about the resignation of senior DOJ official, like, for example, Bradley Weinsheimer, over the handling of Mayor Adams' case. It really does highlight internal dissent. I guess this is a bridge too far for this group. Tell me, what does this indicate about the current state of morale and the integrity within the Justice Department as a whole?
Yes. By the way, I'm trying to avoid the shadows that are on me. It's like I can't.
Don't worry about it. You look great.
All right. Thanks. Well, it shows that the morale is low, and that's why it's important to do things that bring back the morale. I'm hoping that there'll be some prosecutions that will be important for the rule of law. Like, for example, there was a case that I was just seeing of a guy out in the Midwest who was trying to kill cops, and this happened a couple years after January 6th, and he is now trying to get out of it because he said that President Trump's pardons of the January 6th defendants applied to him because he was motivated by January 6th, even though it took place 2 years afterwards and thousands of miles away. And the Department of Justice came out with a memo saying, no, you don't get let out. The pardons do not apply to you. So they need to do more of that, go after the violent crimes. Look, as much as I supported Trump's opponent in the election, Kamala Harris, I did not support his policies. But if they stick to the things that they promise to do, which is go after fentanyl at the border, the immigration crackdown, even though I would disagree with some of it, if they stuck to that, at least that's what they had promised, and that's what people elected. But
by the way, I would be okay with that.
Right. There's some things like an immigration to secure the border. Yes, I support that. It just depends. The devil's in the details. But
agreed.
Right. But when you focus instead on grievances, on just perpetuating the big lie about the 2020 election, to do things like to investigate the investigators, that's a problem, and that will backfire. Look what happened with Bill Barr and John Durham. They investigated the investigators, the Russia investigation. And what happened? They had 2 cases filed that went to the jury, and both were quickly acquitted in a humiliation for Bill Barr,
okay,
John
but that's
Durham, and the entire
sure,
DOJ.
But David, I'm so sorry, but that's just, it's a personal humiliation. They lost big shit. Meanwhile, they didn't go to jail for filing a false claim, fucking up somebody's life. They didn't turn around and end up losing their law license. So, what's really the repercussion? That's the whole problem. That's the whole problem. And now that you have Attorney General Pam Bondi, who you know very well, she's now initiated what you're talking about: comprehensive reviews of federal prosecutors in any case that involves President Trump.
Yeah.
All right. When he was former President Trump.
Right. Well, when it comes to Pam Bondi, my story with her. I ran against her in 2010, and then she won. I lost, and then she hired me as her drug czar. So I worked to close down the pill mills and save lives from the opioid epidemic. So in talking about my own experience with her, it was positive. Now, I have no illusions. I know that she's going to do things I disagree with. We come from different sides of the aisle. We have different politics, and she's going to do things I disagree with. And I knew she would investigate the investigators. And I think that is a mistake, because just like with Bill Barr and John Durham, it's going to backfire. But the difference is that I have never believed, and this is where I have the bright line here, that she would pull a Matt Gaetz and actually prosecute Donald Trump's enemies for political reasons. If that day happens, then we should have another conversation. But I don't believe that'll happen. And for people to say, well, why do you even say nice words anyways? Well, I speak about my own experience. And number 2, keep in mind this. We shouldn't live this is not the world of the perfect. This is Donald Trump's DOJ. If Pam Bondi's not there, who do you think is going to appoint? Well, Matt Gaetz. Yeah, he already tried that. Rudy Giuliani, Emile Beauvais, the number 2. So we have to also pick our battles and realize that, yes, we're going to disagree with people, but when that day comes, if that day comes where Donald Trump's enemies are walked out in handcuffs, Liz Cheney, Anthony Fauci, I will go public, and that will be a totally undermining the rule of law. That will be, but the investigations in themselves, as much as I disapprove of them, they've been done before, and they ended up with a big nothing burger.
When your car breaks down, You take it to a mechanic with no hesitation. You need it, and it's not something most guys can fix themselves. I know I can't. And men should think the exact same way about ED. But the reality is, you might be hesitant to seek help. Thankfully, through HIMSS, you can get access to personalized ED treatment without stepping outside the door. HIMSS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your own couch. HIMSS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. You hear that? 95% cheaper. And the process, it's 100% online, so that there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. And if prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMSS can help you find the ED option that works best for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/Cohen. That's HIMS.com/Cohen for your personalized ED treatment options. Again, that's hims.com/Cohen. And the product mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified by safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. I understand, but here's what most people don't understand. I do, because I lived through it. All right. While you're going to march out there in opposition to any action that AG Bondi does within which to prosecute the prosecutors that went after Trump, they're being handcuffed and shackled and processed and stripped nude and told to bend over and spread your ass cheeks and lift your balls, or
oh my goodness,
or spread your legs.
Imagery.
This is, well, it's because this shit happened to me. Not once, not twice, more than that. And you know what? You lose everything. Who's paying for the legal fees that these folks are going to have to go through, because government has unlimited resources? And who's going to be defending them? And whose stress level goes through the roof because they need to defend an action against the Attorney General of the United States in a prosecution? It's unfair. The playing field is unfair. But the real question I want to ask you is, what message does this whole thing in its totality send to the American people about the DOJ's stance on accountability?
Yeah, it's important that the Department of Justice distribute the law equally without fear or favor. And when it looks like that if you're playing ball like Eric Adams, that you can get treated differently, that hurts the rule of law, that hurts the DOJ. And that's why Emile Beauvais made a real mistake here, because if he wanted to drop the case against Eric Adams, they could have found a reason within prosecutorial discretion that said, here, it's an evidentiary problem. Here, it's a law problem. The Supreme Court has changed the law on public corruption. But he did the opposite. He said, it's not about the evidence. It's not about the strength of the case. It's about the fact that we need him to implement our immigration crackdown. So that's the problem. It is an explicit quid pro quo. And that's why you saw the 7 resignations. That's why you see this whole controversy. And it could have easily been avoided.
Until, of course, you have Elon Musk say that Donald Trump, as president of the United States, has total authority within which to determine the rule of law and how it should be interpreted. And according to him, that's how the Constitution works. Somebody needs to send that guy to constitutional law class.
I have my Constitution somewhere around here. I always keep
I have mine too.
Right? I always keep a little portable Constitution around here somewhere. And it's important because people, oh, here it is. Look at this. There it is. There it is, the Constitution. It's because people don't read it. They don't know it. You have Elon Musk saying things like, and JD Vance said things too, that the executive branch can ignore the courts because the executive branch doesn't have jurisdiction over the courts. The courts don't have jurisdiction over the executive branch. That's totally false. It's called checks and balances. It's in the Constitution. He should check it out. So a lot of this could be avoided if people just read the document they claim to love and adore. And when it comes to the Constitution, you have a separate and co-equal branch of government. And one of the branches of government that has been largely silent, that has shrunk, is the legislature, the legislative branch, the Congress. Where have they been? Why is it that 7 people in the Department of Justice, conservatives who resign, have more courage than just about anyone on the Republican side in the U.S. Senate?
Because they are fearful of losing their jobs, losing their power, having Elon Musk, who said that he will primary anyone based upon Trump's directive that does not agree with Trump's agenda or does not promote his agenda, which is exactly why you are seeing everyone from Kash Patel to Pete Hegseth all the way down. You're seeing them all being confirmed for their nominations. All right, plain and simple.
No, that is why, Michael. That is. It's the threat of the deep pocket putting $25 million in your primary opponent's account. This is different than Trump in the first term. People could go stray from him and not worry that they're going to necessarily face a well-funded primary opponent. Now, that's the threat. Elon Musk has had such an impact upon the way that, you're right, in the last 30 days, our government, and not in a good way.
I will tell you personally, from a personal standpoint, I wish to God that all this shit that had happened would happen now as opposed to before. Because I guarantee you, Trump never would have allowed me to testify, never would have pushed me to testify, and never would have allowed the subpoenas to stand, because according to Trump and others, including Vice President Vance, they have the right within which to ignore a court directive and to actually rip up a subpoena because the president doesn't agree with it. That's basically what they're saying, that there is no checks and balances, that there is no tripartite system of government, that all power is conferred to the executive branch, specifically to the chief executive. But, I want to bring up something that you also referred to. You know Pam Bondi. You like her. I've actually met her. I helped to support her in her run, believe it or not, at Trump's request years ago.
Oh, so you supported her against me?
I did. I was told by my boss to write a check. He told me how much, and I did it, as did other executives at the
Actually,
Trump
that may have been in her reelection.
It was the reelection.
Yeah, because Trump, when we ran the first time, he was a Democrat back then. So, yeah, he wouldn't have helped her back then.
Well, during her confirmation, she was asked, and she pledged to uphold the DOJ's independence. Now, in light of these recent actions, such as the dismissal of the charges against Mayor Adams, how do you assess her adherence to this commitment?
I was thinking about that, about what happened here. And I think the deal was cut when Eric Adams went down to pay tribute to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. That was before the inauguration. Eric Adams made an unscheduled trip down to Mar-a-Lago and met with Trump one-on-one. And Adams said, well, we didn't discuss my case at all. And if you believe that, I've got some land to sell you in the Everglades. But I do think that that's when at least the framework of the deal was cut. And then it was finalized with the meeting that Emile Beauvais had with the lawyers for Eric Adams, the one where Beauvais told the prosecutors to rip up the notes that were taken there. And that's what happened. So we have not heard from General Bondi much about this matter. And I think her silence is telling that this is something that probably rubs her the wrong way. I don't believe that she would have done this. And in fact, the fact that she hasn't said anything about this, that this was done by Emile Beauvais, who was appointed by Donald Trump to this position, not by Pam Bondi. And also, Bondi's chief of staff is the one who spoke up on Twitter to say, here are the evidentiary reasons why this is a weak case. Here is the Supreme Court precedent. Not once did he say, well, we need to do it because we want Eric Adams to play ball. So I do think that that she is not being served well by some of the people around her. And yes, I know you're going to say, well, the buck stops at the top. Fair enough. But there's a reason why she's been quiet about this. And I think it's because she probably doesn't like what went on.
You know, a lot of people have asked me what my thoughts are. You know, a lot of journalists and so on. And I said every interaction, and I've only had a few, with Pam Bondi, she's always been forthright, and she's always done, as far as I was concerned, the right thing. Some people may argue with that, but I find her to be honest and legitimate. Now, while I acknowledge that she is in Camp Trump, so is every single attorney general. You think that Merrick Garland wasn't on Team Biden? You think that Bill Barr wasn't on Team Trump? Right? I mean, the notion that the president of the United States is going to nominate an attorney general that doesn't side with that individual, that's just plain stupid. It's ignorant to think every single person that gets nominated by the president is somebody that's in their camp. And I hate the fact that just because he nominated her and just because she, was confirmed means that every act that she's going to take is going to be one that is corrupt and illegal. I don't see it. I'm with you on that. I don't see it.
Yeah, Michael, you and I have known her, and that's why when I speak about her, and I get pushback from some of our friends at Midas Mighty saying, what do you think now? And do you regret what you said? And keep in mind what I said. I have said about my personal experience with her and the fact that we disagree on a lot of things. She is loyal to Donald Trump. She will investigate the investigators, and I will disagree with that. But at the end of the day, she's not going to walk out Anthony Fauci and Liz Cheney and the others in handcuffs. And by the way, if I'm wrong about that, I'm going to come back on the show and eat some crow. But I still maintain that. And then they say, well, why would you say all these nice things about her knowing all the other things about disagreeing? I said, because you can still be friends with someone you disagree with politically. We've gone too partisan in some ways that you can't even have that conversation. Now, I will say this. Democrats, I just believe we should pick our battles. I think Tulsi Gabbard is a clear and present danger to our country. I think she's a Russian asset. And I think RFK Jr. is dangerous and a host of others.
Patel, who was confirmed.
And I knew Kash Patel. I was friends with him. But you don't hear me saying these things about these others. But if Pam Bondi is not Attorney General, it's not like Sally Yates is walking through that door. You know who's going to be Attorney General? It'll be Matt Gaetz. It'll be Rudy Giuliani. It'll be Emile Beauvais. It'll be the My Pillow guy with a law degree. So when you say you regret what you said, well, once she does something that is contradictory to what I expected, then I'll eat crow. But so far, it's pretty much as I expected, a loyalist who is qualified, who will do things I disagree with, but will not walk out his enemies.
She's not going to cross that line like what Bill Barr did. I mean, for God's sakes, Bill Barr had the DOJ draft a counterfeit federal location monitor agreement specifically for me. I don't see her doing that. I think that she actually has a line in the sand that she will not cross.
Right. She could have come out and said, I agree with it. We should drop this Eric Adams case because we want him to play ball. Because Matt Gaetz would have said that. Emile Beauvais said that I'm paraphrasing, but in other words, he did say that. Pam Bondi has remained quiet about that. And I was on the show with Laura Coates, and she said, aha, the silence is telling. And I got cut off, so I couldn't respond. But my response would have been, are you living in a fantasy world? I mean, you're expecting like her to come out 10 days on the job and say, I disagree with this, I'm resigning, or to get fired. I mean, come on, that's not how it works.
I know. It's not how it works, and they know it too.
And you don't want her to resign, because if she resigns, then Beauvais is going to be the attorney general.
Well, I don't know about Beauvais. It would be Todd Blanche, who is above him. He's the senior.
I don't know too much about. I've never met Todd Blanche. I don't know much about it. So
Todd Blanche actually worked at the SDNY in the Fraud and Crimes Division. He actually had a very good reputation. Listen, we sparred not once, but more than that, twice, 3 times. During the trials and so on, because I was there for both the AG and the Manhattan DA. But my understanding from people who know him, including like my lawyer, Danya Perry, they always say fairly decent things, the same way that you say good things about Pam Bondi. She says the same thing about Todd Blanche. I wouldn't be shocked if the reason that Emile Beauvais signed off on it because Blanche said he won't do it.
That's interesting. It is interesting that a lot of the bad things, the really terrible things that happened, the pardoning of the 1,500 insurrectionists, that happened before Pam Bondi got to the Attorney General's office. This deal with Eric Adams, that was in place before. And so a lot of these really awful things that have been happening. And I know people say, well, she has that investigating the investigator thing. Yeah, I knew she would. I disagree with it. I think it ends in nothing. But yeah, there's some things I'm going to disagree with. And as far as Danya Perry, my old classmate from college, she's as good as it gets as a lawyer, someone with complete integrity. Yeah, and I was in the office when you were prepping with her. I came in to say hello when you were prepping with her before you had the testimony of your life, which you did a great job on, Michael.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Hey, speaking about testimony, you saw that the Trump administration, they've done it again now. They now have barred the Associated Press reporters from the Oval Office, from Air Force One. And they did it for what I would estimate to be one of the most ridiculous reasons I've ever heard. I can't believe it's even fair and proper. It's due to the Associated Press's refusal to adopt the term Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico. Imagine that. They don't want to concede that with a Sharpie and an executive order that you could change what has been historically, first of all, it's owned majoritively by Mexico and Cuba. Donald Trump with an executive order could change the name of a body of water that we technically don't own. My question to you is,
does anyone own that body of water?
Yeah, well, it's controlled and by Mexico and by Cuba, and I think together they have like 56% of the waterway. I mean, it's just some historical fact, right?
The U.S. Navy would have a word probably with that. You know, they're not deferring to Mexico or Cuba or anyone on control of that waterway. But I think it is petty to go punish the AP because they won't write Gulf of America. I mean, come on, that's what we're focusing on.
So my question to you, right? But my question to you here is, how did these actions align with First Amendment protections, something that I know a lot about, and what precedents might they set for press freedom?
Well, if only Trump and his acolytes cared as much about the First Amendment as they do about the Second Amendment, then perhaps be in a better place. But yeah, Elon Musk said he was a First Amendment absolutist, right? Except when people started to report his plane path or when people criticized him. So I guess the First Amendment is just something that you throw in your opponent's face when they try to muzzle you, but you use it to muzzle other people, and they're using it to muzzle the AP because no one has stopped them, and it is petty, and it's another reason why you've seen media capitulation to Trump, because if you don't play ball with the Trump administration, you're going to get sent out the room, and the MAGA supporters will be unleashed on you. So instead, for some of these media folks, it's just easier to capitulate. We've seen this not only with media, we've seen this with billionaires, social media folks. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg used to be a progressive, right? And now he's ultra MAGA. It really is a sad time. And I think that history is going to look down upon this clear self-interest of these folks to try to make an extra buck.
Yeah. So look, and then considering this administration's stance, how then should media organizations navigate the balance between editorial integrity and access to governmental events and locations?
Yeah.
So we're a month already into the new year and things are really stressful. Family, the job, maybe life. Maybe you're in search of something to help you take charge of your life. But most importantly, you need to do it with full mental clarity. Embrace this February and embrace CBD with VIA to experience the powerful benefits of hemp without the high. Trusted by over 500,000 happy customers, Via is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. Via's collection of THC-free products, it combines minor cannabinoids like CBD, CBG, and CBN with botanical supplements for targeted effects that you can actually feel. So whether you're looking to improve your sleep, your focus, or relief, Via has something for you. Now, I've tried the THC-free gummies for sleep, and let me tell you, anyone who knows me knows that I've had sleep issues my entire life. I mean, getting up at 4 a.m., these 4 a.m. wake-ups, they just don't cut it when you're my age. I mean, for God's sakes, where has this product been my entire life? Via is also well known for their award-winning THC-free gummies, vapes, THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops, all of which are crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part, Via legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee. And get a load of this, no medical card required. So let me share some points about Via. First, they're an industry leader with over 500,000 customers served. Another, they're made in the USA, farmed and crafted with care in the United States. And their award-winning service experience their top-notch customer support. They also give you only quality ingredients that are sourced from the finest hemp for your peace of mind. Plus, they're also lab tested and certified. And lastly, affordable, and they're accessible. Their premium products will fit your budget. So if you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and use code Cohen, that's COHEN, to receive 15% off. And if you're new to Via, you'll get a free gift of your choice. And after the purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. So please help to support our show and tell them that we sent you. This year, enhance your every day with Via.
I mean, I know these are deep questions about the First Amendment, and just the easy one, the low-hanging fruit is don't kick out a media organization because they refuse to report things the way you want them reported, especially a name that you just changed via executive order. There was an interesting article by Ezra Klein who wrote that the reason why Donald Trump is acting like a king with all these executive orders is that he's too weak to act as a president. It's because he can't make these changes the way FDR did through going through Congress and getting your legislative agenda adopted. His majority in the House is too narrow. The filibuster rule in the Senate prevents a lot of these things from happening. So he's trying to override it by passing these executive orders, which have been one by one tossed by the courts. So far, I know we don't love optimism here because these are trying times, but so far, the guardrails to some extent have held, and it's because of the judiciary. No thanks to the legislative branch, but because of the judiciary.
Yeah, well, I agree that there have been a pretty fairly decent number of judicial wins in opposition to some of these executive orders. There are hundreds of executive orders that have already been signed. Hundreds. So how many have actually gone to the courts? How many have already been determined, and so on? And it's just a handful, a dozen. So why does Trump like to be king? Because he doesn't want to be told what to do. He has an agenda in his mind that's predicated off of Project 2025, something he claimed he didn't know anything about, didn't know who wrote it, even though a dozen of the folks worked for him. They never read it. He had no knowledge of it. Meanwhile, these executive orders look like they're taken out of pages from Project 2025. I mean, including this entire dismantling of the federal workforce. We have seen steady economic growth. We have seen job reports that have exceeded expectations that was under the Biden administration. Along comes Trump and Elon Musk spearheading these efforts under DOJ, which some of the things that they're saying are so petty. They're so ridiculous, like $40,000 in a grant in order to understand, for example, climate change in Sri Lanka. 40 grand, you know what you're talking about? It's like 1/10,000% of our budget. Imagine that. $40,000. My question that I want to ask you is, they have now implemented significant layoffs across federal agencies, stuff that affects Department of Veterans Affairs, former veterans that were working as civil servants, Department of Education, because they say that as Americans, we're stupid, right? That it costs, say, $35,000 per year to educate our kids. Great, let's not educate them at all, right? Because that's exactly what they want. They want a ignorant class that will just basically listen and accept everything that they say. But my question for you is, what are the immediate and the long-term implications of this downsizing of public services and governmental efficiency?
I was doing an interview on Fox News. Yeah, Fox News. I think it's important that we go on Fox News and give facts to an audience that doesn't hear this kind of stuff. And I told them that if these cuts continue and you have these plane crashes that continue, that Trump is going to get blamed, because people are going to wonder, why are you cutting the FAA while you have all these plane crashes? And the host repudiated. I was like, are you saying that Trump and Elon Musk caused these plane crashes? I said, no, but if this continues to happen, who do you think will be blamed? And rightfully so. You can't just cut big parts out of the budget. You can't just eliminate the head of the Social Security Administration and then expect to get away with it if the Social Security checks are delayed. If plane crashes continue to happen and you don't think people are going to tie that to your FAA cuts, when you eliminate expertise in government, when government starts to fail, you broke it, you own it. And that's the reality for the Trump administration. No matter how much they want to protest, when you have these deep cuts on agencies that people care, that matter to people, and something goes wrong, you're going to own that. So they need to be really careful about this. And also, if they really cared about government efficiency instead of just destroying government and civil service, they wouldn't have fired all those inspectors general who are empowered to go after fraud and abuse in government. And they would also look more deeply at the Pentagon instead of just picking on USAID. And it is, last word on that one, it is unseemly for the richest man in the world to eliminate the agency that serves the poorest people in the world.
Whoa, it's not just that serves the poorest people in the world. How about eliminating programs for research in children's cancer? I'm saying to myself, no, serious, nothing bothered me more than that. The richest man in the world, along with the president of the United States, cutting out a program that from the NIH that does cancer research for children. And I'm blown away because Donald also knows that Eric Trump actually created a foundation. A lot of people are making all these claims, they were stealing money from that foundation. No, they never stole a dollar from it. Absolutely not. I was involved in it. It's bullshit. We raised millions of dollars a year for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. In fact, it was so many millions of dollars that they actually made it a line item in their annual budget. And you know what? It was wrong. The storyline on it was disgraceful, and it was attack on Eric simply because he's Donald's son. That's not true. But Donald knows what that means to Eric and to Lara Trump. And I'm blown away that he allowed them to do that. You're right. When you have a Department of Defense, $900 billion, really? You can't find some fraud, waste, and abuse at the DOD? Because somewhere along the line, I kind of remember years ago reading an article that they were spending fucking $10,000 for a screwdriver and
A toilet
$25,000
seat.
for a fucking toilet seat?
Remember that?
Yeah, I do actually. I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to go after fraud and abuse, maybe look there instead of just that USAID, and just try to cut the Department of Education. Eliminate that, right? And you'll see a huge backlash. People don't want that. And that's where it's really going to hit home amongst the American people.
I actually have one last question for you. All right. Last question. With the convergence of DOJ interference in local governance, in media restrictions, the federal workforce downsizing, suggesting a consolidation of executive power, how do you think that these actions collectively impact the system of checks and balances, which of course we all know is foundational to American democracy? And what the hell do we do about it? We, as just citizens, what do we do about it?
Well, the most dangerous thing is if the executive branch decides to ignore the courts. If the courts say you can't do something and they do it anyways, that's when you have a coup. I don't use the C word until that day happens. I know a lot of people are throwing out the word coup, but I think until the executive branch says the courts have spoken and we will ignore it. And when that happens, that's when we have to take to the streets, because that's when the democracy ends.
Yeah. Well, Dave Arenberg, thank you, my brother. Great to see you. Definitely I'm going to have you back because we have to check to see if our predictions are right or they're wrong, because you know what? Accountability matters. Thank you, my friend. And
thank you, Michael. Great to be on.
Definitely, I need you back. Good to see you.
Hey, before we leave, one last thing. It's all about the you.
It's all about the you.
I have it
Thank you,
in my
brother.
office if you can see it, but yes, love the Canes. Thank you, Michael.
You be well, my friend.